On the humid, rain-scented night of October 24, 1942, at precisely 11:57 p.m., Sergeant John Basilone crouched low behind the water-cooled M1917A1 Browning machine guns, positioned in a sandbagged bunker approximately 200 yards south of Henderson Field, the vital airstrip on Guadalcanal whose capture or destruction would decisively shape control of the Solomon Islands, feeling the weight of responsibility press on his shoulders like the oppressive, dripping humidity of the jungle that pressed in on all sides. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, the moonlight intermittently breaking through the dense canopy to illuminate a narrow jungle trail that snaked like a black river straight toward the heart of the American perimeter, a trail the Japanese had carefully selected, based on intelligence, as the weakest point in the defenses, where only 16 Marines and 4 heavy machine guns stood between a seasoned division of enemy troops and the runway itself. At 26, Basilone, a former Army private turned Marine sergeant, had served 3 years in the Philippines, mastering the M1917A1 and its complex water cooling system, and had trained his men rigorously, instilling in them a combination of mechanical expertise and psychological discipline that allowed each gun to fire continuously at 400 rounds per minute without fear of overheating or misfire. Behind him, the Cactus Air Force, the Wildcats patrolling overhead, the dauntless dive bombers roaring off the runway with 1,000-pound bombs destined for Japanese convoys, kept Henderson Field operational 24 hours a day, denying daylight resupply to the Japanese and forcing enemy ships into the deadly game of the Tokyo Express, where fast destroyers risked interception at night. Lieutenant General Harakichi Hyakutake, understanding the strategic necessity of capturing the airfield, had committed 7,000 of his best troops from the elite 2nd Infantry, Sendai, division to a grueling 15-mile march through the tangled, almost impassable jungle, marching straight toward Basilone's position, confident that a concentrated 3-regiment assault, including the 16th, 29th, and 124th Infantry Regiments, would smash through the defensive line, overwhelm the Americans with sheer numbers and aggression, and clear a path for the Japanese to reclaim the airfield. Yet, Basilone, aware of the enemy's doctrine emphasizing massed bayonet charges, night infiltration, and suppression with light mortars, had anticipated every conceivable scenario. He positioned trip flares, interlocking machine guns, mortars, 37mm canister firing guns, and intricately wired concertina barriers to funnel the attackers into pre-registered killing zones, knowing that discipline, firepower, and tactical foresight could compensate for the overwhelming numerical disparity, and that even an elite Japanese division could be stopped if the Marines maintained their nerve and precision. The preparations for this night had begun long before October 24th. Basilone's story on Guadalcanal traced back to the first landing on August 7, 1942, when the transport Zealand dropped anchor off Lunga Point and he watched the Higgins boats churn through surf toward an island that few Americans could even locate on a map. The Japanese had retreated, leaving behind a partially completed airfield carved from coral and jungle, which within 48 hours, Marine engineers had made operational, and by August 20th, Wildcat fighters were landing at Henderson Field, their daily sorties northward to Rabaul and back demonstrating American air superiority and inflicting severe losses on Japanese supply convoys. Basilone walked the perimeter alongside other squad leaders, listening to Chesty Puller's explanations of defensive strategy. For rifle companies holding a line typically requiring 8, the jungle pressing in from 3 sides, the airfield like a bullseye at the center, vulnerable yet protected by improvisation, ingenuity, and sheer audacity. The terrain itself dictated defensive planning. Swamp to the north blocked one approach, dense jungle and ravines to the south disrupted massed formations, leaving a central ridge line as the most likely axis of assault, and it was precisely this corridor that Basilone's guns now commanded, a narrow funnel that would concentrate any attack directly into the muzzles of his 4 machine guns. Basilone's careful study of the Browning M1917A1 had made him a master of its operation under combat conditions. Each gun, weighing over 100 pounds with tripod and water jacket, could sustain a rate of fire capable of mowing down an entire company of advancing infantry if properly supplied and coordinated. He trained his crews on rapid barrel swaps, clearing jams, and belt changes, calculating the importance of water cooling under the jungle heat, and stockpiled over 6,000 rounds of ammunition to ensure uninterrupted fire. Behind the gun pits, Marines had built log-reinforced bunkers and improvised firing positions, each carefully plotted to cover overlapping sectors, ensuring that any Japanese soldier who advanced, even under darkness, could be targeted from multiple angles, creating a lethal web of fire that would halt attacks before they reached the inner wire. Intelligence reports from the first weeks of October had painted a dire picture. Japanese troops infiltrating from the west along the Matanika River, aerial reconnaissance confirming the buildup of 2,000 entrenched men, additional forces arriving nightly via destroyer, and artillery emplacement including 75mm mountain guns, 105mm howitzers, and heavy mortars capable of sustained bombardment. American forces numbered approximately 11,000 Marines and soldiers, supported by Henderson Field aircraft and naval gunfire, yet the decisive point had quietly become Basilone's sector, where 16 men faced a division-level attack, their survival, and the airfields, dependent on coordination, fire discipline, and the relentless operation of their machine guns. By October 22nd, preparations intensified. Double-apron barbed wire was strung in semicircular layers around Henderson Field, with additional concertina wire and trip flares wired to ignite on disturbance, creating obstacles that slowed enemy movement while illuminating attackers for gunners. Machine gun pits were dug deep, with palm log overhead cover allowing traversing across 90-degree arcs without exposure. Range cards were meticulously prepared, and spare barrels and water cans were staged for immediate replacement. Basilone personally supervised ammunition layout, ensuring belts for ball, armor-piercing, and tracer rounds were accessible, and that supply lines could reach gun positions even under infiltration attempts. Every detail was considered: the angle of fire, the interlocking support between weapons, the distance to wire obstacles, the pre-registered mortar fire, and the coordination with riflemen in trees and reverse slope positions, all designed to multiply the lethal effect of a few men against a formidable enemy. The Japanese assault began in earnest on October 24th. Initial movement was detected at 11:47 p.m. as trip flares ignited, revealing sappers cutting through outer wire while Basilone's crews held fire, waiting for the optimal moment. A preparatory bombardment of knee mortars and light artillery began at 11:52 p.m., accurately walking shells across the forward positions, indicating detailed intelligence about American placements. At 12:15 a.m., the first waves of Japanese infantry surged through the trail, rifles fixed with bayonets, supported by light machine guns and mortars, only to be met with a devastating, continuous hail of fire from Basilone's 4M 1917A1S, each sweeping left to right across the killing zone, cutting down hundreds in the first engagement, leaving dozens tangled in the wire, their courage unable to overcome the calculated lethality of interlocking fire and prepared obstacles. Throughout the night, the intensity escalated. Flanking attacks attempted to breach his positions, close-quarters combat erupted with pistols, grenades, and improvised measures, and Basilone personally carried ammunition and even repositioned the heaviest gun under fire, firing over 1,500 rounds in minutes from a new angle to disrupt enemy waves, saving the sector from potential collapse. The fighting raged without pause, with repeated assaults, infiltrations, and artillery barrages continuing until dawn on October 27th. Over 2 nights, Basilone's 16 men fired over 20,000 rounds, repelling waves of elite Japanese infantry despite mechanical failures, ammunition shortages, and casualties, ultimately leaving the approaches to Henderson Field littered with over 900 enemy dead in his sector alone, while his section suffered only 4 killed and 6 wounded. Reinforcements from the 164th Infantry Regiment arrived to fill gaps and strengthen flanks, integrating Army M1 Garand and additional Browning automatic rifles, increasing defensive firepower and coordination. Japanese infiltration tactics tested every facet of the defense. Small teams attacked supply lines, command posts, and secondary positions, forcing Basilone's crews to split attention between multiple threats, yet through leadership, preparation, and the lethal coordination of machine guns, mortars, artillery, and rifle fire, the perimeter held, decimating Japanese regiments and breaking the offensive. By October 27th, the full consequences of the battle were evident. In Basilone sector alone, over 643 Japanese soldiers were confirmed dead, with adjacent army-held sectors accounting for an additional 412. Command structure of attacking units was decimated, with regimental commanders killed, and surviving forces reduced to combat-ineffective numbers. Henderson Field remained under American control, ensuring continued air superiority, sustained disruption of Japanese supply lines, and forcing Japanese strategic recalibration across the Solomon Islands. Basilone's leadership, technical skill, and courage were recognized with a Medal of Honor, a testament to the power of disciplined firepower, preparation, and doctrine over sheer numbers, a narrative of individual heroism and industrialized warfare that would influence military operations for the remainder of the Pacific War. Basilone would later fall on Iwo Jima in 1945, but his legacy, demonstrated at Henderson Field, proved that carefully applied modern firepower, coordination, and courage could decisively shape battle outcomes, alter campaigns, and illustrate the enduring principle that discipline and preparation could triumph over numerical superiority, and that a small, determined force could annihilate elite enemy units when armed, trained, and strategically positioned with lethal precision.